Viewing of this video on a television is recommended for the best experience.
A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed.
The 4th of July, Independence Day in the United States of America. The United States was born on July 4th, 1776, when the Continental Congress adopted unanimously the Declaration of Independence. It was stated by John Adams that around this time, 1/3 of the United States were patriots, supporting independence of the 13 colonies from the King of England. 1/3 of the United States were loyalists to the King of England, and 1/3 of colonists were undecided. The greatest number of loyalists was centered in New York City and Long Island. Rewind to April 19th, 1775, when a British force of 700 men from Boston began to march on orders to capture and destroy colonial military supplies in Concord, Massachusetts. The British Army regulars were first met in Lexington, Massachusetts by 77 militiamen. The first shots were fired just as the sun was rising, which would result in 8 militia casualties and just 1 British soldier. The colonial militiamen would retreat Lexington, falling back to Concord, Massachusetts, and their numbers would grow to 400 strong. Only 100 British Army regulars would march on Concord, arriving to intensified fighting at approximately 11 o'clock a.m. in the morning. Outnumbered and casualties being suffered on both sides, the British would ultimately retreat. As fighting intensified, militia numbers quickly grew to upwards of 3,960 as the British soldiers marched back to Boston under heavy fire. The accumulated militias would eventually blockade the narrow land accesses to Charlestown and Boston, beginning what is known as the Siege of Boston. The right to bear arms is ingrained in American culture. The American landscape is speckled with sportsmen's clubs dedicated to education and training of all citizens in their right to safely own and operate firearms. In modern America, one may find that 1/3 of citizens support the right to bear arms, 1/3 do not support the right to bear arms, and 1/3 are indifferent. Outsiders of American culture are often shocked, confused, and even skeptical of the American right to bear arms. Liberty can be jarring when one from the outside encounters a different way of doing things. The confusion and skepticism can often be attributed to one simple thing. The majority of people of the world are generationally conditioned to act as subjects rather than citizens of liberty. The United States formed when the rest of the world was ruled by kings and emperors. Kings and emperors were often of unlimited power, enjoying immunity and freedom to do as they please. They enjoyed control of entire armies and would never limit themselves in their freedom to bear arms. Kings, lords, and emperors would never go hungry, and often enjoyed participating in a hunt. Peasants were subject to a life of service to the emperor or king. There were occasional uprisings in the Old World, often quickly quashed. Commoners' ability to hunt was often highly restricted, and commoners often faced famine throughout history. In the United States, most citizens are able to practice their right to hunt regardless of sex, race, or ownership of land. Here in America, we recognize one of the most basic needs of a human being: the right to eat. Despite the recognized right to hunt, it is curious that the general public in the United States still has inhibitions against hunting likely attributable to the historical and generational conditioning of subjecthood. After all, the majority of people in the world are descended from commoners, not emperors and royalty. We know that the average citizen will choose wild-caught salmon over farm-raised salmon at the fish market. Compared to farm-raised animals, wild game meat is often leaner, free-range, natural, possibly more nutritious due to a more varied and natural diet, antibiotic, and hormone-free. In order to recognize the fair and democratic opportunity of every citizen to hunt, thus eat, it is essential to recognize fair and democratic access to firearms for each and every citizen. Without proper tools, the citizen is unable to maintain and practice the core rights that set free American citizens aside from the subjects of the world. It is estimated that up to 360 million people were murdered in the 20th century through the absolute power of tyrannical governments, political parties, and dictators. This is more people than currently live in the United States in 2024. These murders and genocides often occurred through the systemic disarming of populations and were often religious, racial, or political in nature. An average of 3.6 million deaths of helpless subjects per year in the 20th century. Always keep your firearm pointed in a safe direction. Treat every firearm as if it were loaded. Be sure of your target and what is beyond. Keep your finger out of the trigger guard until you are ready to fire. Make sure your barrel is clear of obstructions and only carry the proper ammunition for that firearm. Unload your firearm when not in use. Point your firearm only at what you intend to shoot. Do not run, jump, or climb with a loaded firearm. Store firearms and ammunition in safe and separate locations. Avoid alcoholic beverages before and during shooting. There may be as many as 11,508 sportsmen's clubs speckled across the United States, and one should figure about 1,000 members per club. It is estimated that as of 2024, there are an estimated 82,880,000 gun owners in the United States versus an overall population of approximately 333 million. American citizens as a collective could be the largest army in the world. 1865. Newly emancipated citizens of the United States faced some of the first gun control restrictions of the United States in the form of black codes, restrictions which prevented blacks from bearing arms. To this day, the casual researcher may notice a hard-to-ignore correlation between varying pressures of gun control in relation to regional density of minority populations. 1968. The first year, Massachusetts enacts the requirement of gun licensing within the state, and on the national level, the Gun Control Act of 1968 sweeps the nation. Largely created in an attempt to disarm the Black Panther Party, which was formed in 1966. Despite sweeping gun control measures, the overall murder rate of the United States continued to rise after 1968. The murder rate of the United States was not even on the same playing field as some other nations, such as Canada, Australia, England, and Wales. Although there are some exceptional nations when it comes to murder rate, the United States is not a contender for highest murder rate in the world. Many of the nations at the top of the list have stricter gun control and lower levels of citizen gun ownership than the United States. In fact, even the casual researcher cannot ignore the fact that gun control and ownership appears to have little to no correlation at all on the overall murder rate of a nation. Within the United States, there seems to be little correlation between gun control and murder rate. The casual researcher can see that the majority of the United States is as close to ideal as one could hope for, while there are notable blemishes within the nation. Cultural, social, and economic harmony may be associated with low crime and murder. Economic harmony and low poverty may be associated with low crime and murder. Good overall education, practical job training, and opportunity may be associated with low crime and murder. Every citizen should be aware and conscious that there are actions, symbols, and customs that unify our communities, states, and nation. Things such as anthems, flags, and mascots. Unification of all citizens, regardless of things such as race, sex, or age, creates harmony, which in turn decreases the risk of crime and murder. All citizens should also be aware that things such as rioting and protesting either create or are a strong symptom of social disharmony. All citizens should be aware that disharmony is a risk for increasing the risk of crime and murder. While citizens have the right to protest, they should also be aware of the risks and weigh the benefits against the known costs. Each American citizen should feel free, if they choose, to practice their inherent right to arms, regardless of race, sex, culture, or otherwise. Likewise, each American citizen should respect the inherent right of other citizens to practice their right to arms, regardless of race, sex, or otherwise. Importantly, we owe it to both ourselves and other citizens to promote firearm education, safety, and training. Proper education increases competency and responsibility surrounding firearms and reduces mishandling, accidents, and crime. Likewise, the citizen should be aware of and detest uneducated, inexperienced, and irresponsible citizens that promote the misunderstanding, mishandling, and improper use of firearms, which may harm their community and possibly the entire nation. The National Rifle Association was first proposed to Abraham Lincoln in 1861, after commencement of the Civil War, in a letter sent to him by Americans living abroad in England. The idea of the association was partially inspired by a National Rifle Association formed in England 1 year prior. The American National Rifle Association was formed in 1871 in response to terrible Union Army marksmanship during the Civil War. It has been said there was only 1 hit per 1,000 shots throughout the war. It was also said that only 1 out of 10 soldiers knew the use and purpose of rifle sights. U.S. Congress created a national board for promotion of rifle practice in 1903, which subsequently led to the creation of the Civilian Marksmanship Program with an objective of teaching marksmanship skills to civilians and youth. The right to bear arms is not without its risks. In 2023, there were approximately 43,000 gun-related deaths in the United States. On average, about 50% or more of these gun deaths may be attributed to suicide. The remaining deaths will be divided between accidental deaths, police shootings on suspects, self-defense, and criminal homicide. It is worth noting that each year, approximately 250,000 people die accidentally. Reasons could include falling down the stairs, tripping, or simply just having bad luck. The average person is about 10 times more likely to die doing absolutely nothing at all and just being subject to bad luck or clumsiness compared to the possibility of being murdered with a gun. It is important to note that car-related fatalities are comparable to or may exceed gun deaths when suicides are removed from consideration. We often consider car fatality to be an acceptable risk and trade-off for the immense convenience and freedom of travel we are allowed through modern transportation, just as we can consider an equal or lesser amount of loss to be an acceptable risk and trade-off against the average 3.4 million deaths per year we saw in the 20th century due to tyrannical governments and dictators. March 5th, 1770, 9 agitated British soldiers fired upon Bostonian civilians, killing 3 people and wounding 8 others. This event became known as the Boston Massacre. The conflict largely came about due to taxes aimed at colonists in order to raise funds to pay the salaries of governors and judges so they would remain loyal to Great Britain and to establish precedent that British Parliament had the right to tax the colonies. Firearms are known as a force multiplier in self-defense. They multiply the defensive force of an otherwise smaller and weaker individual against a potentially larger, stronger, and more powerful aggressor. In nature, almost universally, the larger and stronger animal will always come out victorious in a battle. The same is true across nearly all fighting sports, including boxing, wrestling, and MMA, which is why weight class divisions exist. No matter how much training in self-defense one undergoes, it is an unfortunate fact that a 100-pound individual may never stand a chance against a 240-pound individual in some sort of face-off. Force multipliers such as firearms balance the playing field for smaller at-risk individuals that may not have asked to be in a self-defense situation in the first place. Firearms give many citizens a fighting chance when they may not otherwise stand a chance. Even though the modern United States military is among the top in the world, let us never forget the mythical and legendary quote, "You cannot invade the mainland United States. There would be a rifle behind every blade of grass." If you enjoyed this video, you only need to do 3 things to support the production of more videos like this one. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, and share to any friends you think may enjoy this video. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to leave a comment.
Investigate your state rules, regulations, and licensing requirements if you'd like to get into shooting sports. Education is important, even if you live in a constitutional carry state. Investigate local gun club opportunities for education, training, and community.